Hey, seventh grade, how you doing? This is Mr. Garnett Cook. Hope you're having a good weekend. My screencast today is going to be really a preview of the two optional assignments that you'll be given for the next week, really a week and a half. I'll remember to explain why at the end, which focuses on the geography of Greece and the founding narratives of the Greeks, specifically the epics of Homer. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about both of these things as a way of setting up what you're going to be learning about over the course of the next week and a half. Just a little bit about the geography of the Greek world to get you set up. And I will begin with a couple of general points. And I have a couple of images that you'll see here on the screen, and it relates specifically to my first point, which is when we think about Greece, really then and now, but particularly when we talk about mainland Greece, which is this area here. We're talking about an area that's about the size of the state of Louisiana. And so Louisiana is shaded in red down here in this map of the United States. And so Greece is not a particularly big country. Just give you a sense geographically of how it compares to, say, the United States, which is a much larger country. The main parts of Greece that I want to point out to you right now, just a couple of basic things. There is what is called mainland Greece. And if I open up the pen, just to show you what I mean by mainland, this is mainland Greece here. I did not circle this part down here where Athens is, but that's also part of mainland Greece. So when we talk about mainland Greece, that's what we're referring to. Then there's what is called the Peloponnesus. That is this area of land. Let me open up the pen again here. This is this area of land that jets out. It's connected to mainland Greece by a narrow isthmus, which is right here. This is where the city-state of Sparta was. Sparta was the city that dominated the Peloponnesus. Later on, when we learn about the Peloponnesian War, it's named for this region of Greece known as the Peloponnesus. Then there is the island of Crete, that is down here. This is where Minoan civilization began and flourished. We'll learn about a little bit more about the Minoans next week. So you have the island of Crete, and then finally you have the islands, all the Greek islands. I'm trying to remember the count. There are I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how many islands there are surrounding Greece, but there are many. There are several seas I'll point out to you right now. There is the Ionian Sea, which is the western border of Greece. There is what is known as the Sea of Crete, which is between the island of Crete and mainland Greece. There's the Aegean Sea, which is between Greece on one side and Turkey on the other. And then, of course, farther out, you get to the Mediterranean Sea. Greece is a peninsula. For those of you who may have forgotten, a peninsula is a body of water, body of land, excuse me, surrounded by water on three sides. And I just briefly described the seas in and around Greece. But Greece is a peninsula. And a very important geographical point, no major rivers in Greece. So this is not a river valley civilization. So you don't have that kind of water superhighway running through the land that's going to connect all the different cities together. A couple of things about the impact of this geography on Greece's development and some of the sources you'll look at for the optional assignments. We'll go into this in a little bit more detail. One of the things about Greece, because of its topography and because of its size and because of its location, it really develops what we call a seafaring tradition. This is a sea culture. And connection to and reliance upon the sea is very important to how Greece develops in the ancient world. They rely heavily on a navy for power and protection. At the height of its power, Athens had the strongest navy in Greece. They were the ones who really were at the head of all the city states in terms of the development of a strong navy. And so the Athenians will develop vast trade networks across the Mediterranean. And their navy is the key to their military power as well, because particularly when we get to the conflict between Athens and Sparta, Sparta has the reputation for having the best soldiers in the Greek world, but the navy gives the Athenians sort of an equalizer. They also rely on the sea for trade and cultural exchange across the Mediterranean, and you can see some images here that show you the various trade networks that the Greeks had at different times, just to give you a sense of how far and wide Greek influence spread over the course of time. Because of the topography, and particularly the rugged landscape, you can see in this image here, the sort of rugged landscape of Greece. Greece will develop a series of independent city-states that will be very much disconnected from one another. Isolation is an important consequence of that, each city-state developing in isolation from the other. I think I mentioned in a previous screencast that the only things for the longest time that the city-states really shared in common were they spoke a common language and they worshipped the same gods. Otherwise, in many important ways, very different from one another. Anyway, so that's just a little bit about the geography. I also want to talk about your second optional assignment, which is going to focus on founding narratives, and particularly the epics of Homer. You're going to be learning a little bit about his two epic poems known as the Iliad and the Odyssey. And you're going to be focusing a little bit more on the Odyssey than the Iliad, although in the assignment there will be a short video that will give you a brief summary of the story in the Iliad. The Iliad and the Odyssey both have as a big part of their story this, well, question of whether or not it's a real or fictional event, the Trojan War, which was, according to Homer, a conflict fought between the Greeks and the city of Troy. On this map down here, the city of Troy is located over here, and this area shaded in red here is the area of what was known as the Mycenaean Empire. At one point between 1400 and 1100 BCE, the Mycenaeans really had spread their influence across, outside of Greece itself, across the Sea of Crete to Crete, excuse me, and then across the Aegean to areas along the coast of what is modern day Turkey. The city of Troy was a powerful city on the eastern coast of what is now Turkey, across the Aegean from Greece. This image here in the top left is the archaeological site at Troy. They have unearthed the city. And this is an artist's rendering here on the right of what some people think, according to Homer's description, the city of Troy might have looked like at the time that these events supposedly took place. So Homer has these two epic poems that describe the Trojan War and its aftermath. The Iliad focuses on one particular point in the Trojan War, and the Odyssey is about the return of a Greek warrior named Odysseus back to his home Ithaca on the west coast of Greece after the Trojan War. This is a conflict that pitted Greeks, who in the Iliad are called the Achaeans, against the city of Troy. There's a big question as to whether or not this war actually took place. Most people think it is probably based on some event that actually happened, but whether or not the details in the Iliad are in fact accurate or not, a lot of people say probably not, but inspired by actual historical events. These epics were written sometime around 800 BCE. There is a question, as you'll learn, about whether or not there really was a Homer, and if there was, whether or not he really wrote both stories. Some scholars have noted differences in the writing styles that lead some to suspect that they may have been written by different people, but nobody knows for sure. The stories date to the Mycenaean period, and so if there is some truth to the story, particularly of the Iliad, if there's some truth to the idea that there was a Trojan War, it would probably have taken place during the time of the Mycenaean kingdom. But that's all speculation. Nobody knows for sure whether or not that's the case. So anyway, you have these two optional assignments that you could do for next week. When you look on the calendar, you will note that they're not due until Tuesday of the following week, so a week from Tuesday. And the big reason for that is because we do have holidays coming up. We have the beginning of Passover. We also have Good Friday and Easter. So there's a longer period that you're going to have to do these two assignments. But again, the focus is on the geography of Greece and on founding narratives, and particularly focusing on Homer's epics and thinking about those epics as founding narratives. And you'll have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about them over the course of the next week and a half.